cloud now.
It's working. The
Hi,
YouTube.
Geshe.
Hi, hello. Just, okay, great.
Yeah, now it's working. I just will make, wait. Geshe,
I delete.
do you, now you're a co-host.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I just want to announce that every change that it will be due to what's happening in Israel or to other things. So I will announce it in the WhatsApp in the Alma Friend web too. So don't worry about it.
Okay, great.
And now, thank you so much, Geshe, for
Thank you,
taking
delete.
this time.
Okay, so, well, first of all, recording stopped.
No, because I didn't do it to the cloud. Now it's okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm really sorry we couldn't have class for so long. You probably know that last 3 weeks ago I couldn't do it because I was on Mrs. teachings, and then of course because of Kelsang Jadarim's classes. And then right after that it didn't work either. It was just so much to do. Anyway, we've got today and we've got next week, but I'm actually returning to Israel. I'm returning to India. I'm flying back to India on April the 10th, which means, well, April the 10th is a Monday, so we won't have class on that day. And then I don't know what the situation will be with my room because I haven't had internet, so I need to get organized, get a new connection probably. I'm also thinking of getting a generator because of these consistent or, well, frequent power cuts. So just to be sure that our classes won't be discontinued. I mean, we won't have any power cut in between. So a few things I need to organize, which is why I don't know how long it'll take me. That's one thing. So I hope it's only going to be 2 or 3 weeks. But the other thing is because of the time difference. Now, because of the time saving, I mean, the summertime that's just started, the difference between India and Israel is only 2.5 hours, I believe. And elsewhere in Europe, it's 3.5 hours. So that means it's not too bad, but we can't have it at the exact same time as we've had it so far. Monday works good. I don't know about you. In the end, it's up to you to decide what day of the week you'd like me to do it. But the thing is, I need to change the time. So I was thinking if it's 8:30 in India, to start at 8:30 in India, so I'll be done by 10, and then I'll still can go to bed, you know, afterwards. It's not going to be that late. So if that's okay with you, I think that means it's 6 in Israel, right? Right now, that would be 6 p.m. and then 5 p.m. in other places in Europe and the United States. I don't know. Yeah, well, that's a suggestion. And as I said, I could possibly change it to another day of the week, whatever works best. So you could decide together and I go with the majority.
Yeah, we will stay in Monday and we will do it in 6 Israel time.
Okay, if that works.
Time.
Right. Okay, does that work? Okay, great. Anyway, for some of you who are not present at the time, it doesn't make any difference. But yeah, I just wanted to throw it out there. And that's only going to start once I've settled back in McLeodganj, which means we'll have today and we'll have next week. Okay, great. Okay, then let's start class itself. Oh, one last thing, you may be wondering why I didn't get any material. Well, I haven't been able to get anything new organized yet, but I will the next few days. I'll work on it. So once I'm McLeodganj, I'll continue with the new material. We've got a little bit left for today and for next week. All right. Okay. So let's start then, as we usually do, with some breathing meditation. And then followed by the prayer and so forth. And then to be inspired to follow his example, visualize right in this space in front of you Buddha Shakyamuni, who's a manifestation, all the enlightened qualities that we ourselves can attain and which countless beings have attained in the past. Being inseparable from your Lama or your Lamas. Appearing as a holy ordained monk in saffron robes, seated on an open lotus, a sun and a moon disk. Smiling at you and at the same time at all sentient beings. Ready to guide us and help us on the path. And at the same time, we're surrounded by all sentient beings. For whom we are here today. I think that they're seated everywhere where there's some space. Appearing as humans in the human form. For those who you don't like, give you a hard time, you simply find annoying or difficult, seated right in front of you. And remember that despite our differences and possible problems with each other, we're basically all the same in wanting to be happy, wanting to be satisfied, and wanting to be free from unwanted experiences. And all of us having the right to experience peace and satisfaction. And that it's due to our basic misapprehension of reality that we constantly create new causes for sufferings and other problems. And so based on that understanding, generate affectionate love towards each and everyone surrounding you. Sense of care, affection, and closeness. And also with the understanding that at some point in the past, there's no one to whom we've not been extremely close in a past life. And then focus in particular on different kinds of suffering sentient beings experience since beginning this time and continue to experience. And as they're able to attain liberation. Just 1 second. Mom, ich bin hier am Unterrichten. Ich bin am Unterrichten. And so generate great compassion, that is the affectionate mind that wishes for all sentient beings to be completely free from any unwanted experience. And the other types of sufferings. Such as the suffering of change or the suffering of having the 5 aggregates. And that great compassion then gives way to the altruistic attitude that takes personal responsibility for the welfare of sentient beings. That is determined to do whatever is necessary to help sentient beings to overcome suffering and its causes. But since that is only possible once we become a Buddha ourselves, let's generate the heartfelt aspiration based on our affection, great compassion, altruistic attitude. To become fully enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Generate that aspiration from the depth of your heart. And as if for the first time, and then strengthen it further by taking refuge in generating bodhichitta through the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, great. And let's continue. Sorry for that interruption, someone called me. Anyway, we've come to the topic of karma. Well, we're still continuing with that topic. I briefly talked about it last time. And just to remind you, well, karma really refers to the experiences that we have. Not everything that happens to us is a particular karma of some sort. I mean, for instance, even if someone steals from us, it doesn't mean that we experience or that we have accumulated the karma of stealing, which needs to be explained. It sounds a little contradictory, but just to be aware that it's the experience that counts. So someone may steal from us and we're not even aware of it, and then maybe replace the money and we have no loss whatsoever. There's in no way, it doesn't have any effect on us, which in that case, although we were the focus of that person taking from us, however, since we never noticed, it wouldn't be correct to say that that we've experienced the karma or that the karma of stealing ripened on us. It didn't. Whereas on the other hand, if we have the experience, if we feel this is happening to us, Whereas in actuality, well, we may just imagining it, well, that's debatable, but that would be more likely to be, in that case, it would be more likely to be the case that we experience the karma of stealing, for instance. So the point being that it's all dependent on how we experience the situation, what we experience, and so forth. And of course, the karma we create, or the karmic cause that brought about a certain experience, is determined by the motivation. So therefore, it's important, of course, to be mindful of our motivation in each moment, to try as best as we can apply mindfulness. And even if we notice there's motivation that can potentially harm ourselves and others, and therefore ourselves, to make an extra effort to stop that. To stop the motivation, to change it around, apply an antidote, and so forth. But also be aware of karma's characteristics as described here, so that karma, can you see it? Can you actually see what I displayed on the screen?
No, we don't see anything.
Oh, sorry, wait, let me just do it. What went wrong? Okay.
No, it's you. Yeah.
Wait,
We see the answer question now.
Yep.
Now
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of the characteristics here, the main characteristics to remember, of course, karma is definite. That a certain cause gives rise to a certain result. There's no other way around it. There's no way that a cause that is motivated by harmful motivation can give rise to a karmic effect that is positive, as an example. But not just that, and that I think is relatively easily understood, but also the fact that all our actions increase, so that a tiny virtuous action, of course, can have a great virtuous result or positive result. But on the other hand, of course, a tiny non-virtuous action can also yield an incredibly negative result, which is why it's recommended to do the Vajrasattva practice daily, to recite the mantra of Vajrasattva at least 21 times, which is said to remove that characteristics. In other words, that second characteristic of increase, of multiplying, that if we do this on a daily basis by reflecting on what we've done throughout the day, our negative actions, well, based on that, on the 4 powers, of course, if we then purify with the Vajrasattva mantra 21 times, that the karma won't increase. It doesn't take very long. It's a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the most, that you can do the mantra, maybe a little longer, depending on how quick you can recite it. But the point being, making that a habit, at least our karmic force or karmic potential, the negative karmic potential, doesn't increase. And of course, you also understand that if an action is not done, we won't meet with its results. That's pretty much, well, pretty close to the first characteristic. So then if something happens to us, if we have some experience, to remember, okay, I've created the cause of that. And it doesn't have to be in this life. It could have been, was more likely to have happened in the previous life. But instead of slipping into that role of like a victim, like I can't do anything, and making others responsible. Of course, others are also responsible. It's a whole conglomerate. It's a whole kind of collection of different causes and conditions. But definitely, I've also, or the person, the former continuum of myself, has created the causes of that. And just remember and rejoice. Well, that karma, now having ripened, can't ripen in that form on me again. So to really kind of bring that into our daily practice when stuff happens that we don't like, to remember again and again, it wouldn't ripen on me unless I had created the causes for that. And so actions, of course, don't go to waste without yielding a result, which means well, therefore, I need to purify. So it makes sense to purify negativities. In that way, to remember these characteristics again and again, and of course, be really careful with what we do. I mean, mindfulness, of course, obviously, it's at the forefront. It's the foundation for all our actions. But we don't just do it for our own benefit, but also, of course, for the benefit of all sentient beings. So to remember that as part of this practice of observing karma. And then, as it's described here, to refrain from negative actions, and we're all familiar with them, the 3 of the body, the 4 of the speech, and the 3 of the mind. You can just go through them. They're right here, mentioned in here. All right, so this is for this week. The focus, of course, being on bodhichitta, on taking personal responsibility for the welfare of all sentient beings, and including ourselves, our own welfare, of course. That's not to be neglected, but to practice as His Holiness usually stresses, as Kyabje Jadu Rinpoche has stressed during his last teachings, to bring bodhicitta into our daily life, however fake it may feel at the beginning. But the first step is just to bring it back again and again and again. And in this case, also bring in karma, the way I just discussed. But of course, it wouldn't be complete unless we had emptiness as well, which is why we'll go back to the text. So there's a little bit left as part of the first verse. And as I mentioned, well, a few times before, the first verse, the beginning always takes the longest. The second verse will be much shorter. It's about what kind of causes and conditions there are. We won't spend that much time on it. But yeah, so I think today and next time we'll finish the first verse. But before I continue going through the text, I want to go through some questions, which I thought were really good. Where are the questions? Here they are. Okay. So, Shimi sent us an illustration, but first, well, his first question is, after contemplating emptiness for a while, will we still believe that there can be any inherent joy in anything? Yeah, I mean, belief, there are different kinds of belief, I guess. There's this deep kind of emotional belief that we still believe, but we still have a sense, oh, if I just had that, I'd be happy. This is less on an intellectual level, but it's that level, or that emotional state that drives our actions. On an more intellectual level, it'll be lessened, I guess. I mean, it'd be less, not as strong as it used to, because we know intellectually, but we're not driven that much by our intellectual understanding of reality. That's why we're trying to get used. That's why we're trying to familiarize with the lack of inherent existence by going over it again and again and again, so that it actually reaches a deeper level of our mind, a deeper level, meaning a more emotional level. Emotional in the sense that even on a more instinctive, more emotional level, well, it appears as joyful, but there's a sense, no, it's not worth it. It's not worth the energy to run after it and pursue whatever it is. So he says that he doubts it. Great. From my own experience, I know it's still there. I mean, it's really strong. At times, there's certain things, oh, I want this. And only if I take the time and reflect on it, it may change. Anyway, so he says, I doubt it because that would be defeating our practice. If not inherent joy, then what kind of joy can we find in whatever we do? Actual joy, because inherent joy is impossible. So actual joy, I mean, joy, what we call joy, which we mistakenly believe to be inherently existent. I mean, it's not just that. It's so interesting how when there's an object, what actually happens is we experience some joy. There's an object, maybe another person, maybe a situation, whatever it is. And as we experience that particular object, joy arises. And we then project this joy onto the object. It's actually my own mind feeling it. It's my own mind experiencing it. It's not the object over there. But then our mind labels, oh, joyful. And beyond the label, it seems that joy is now inherent in the object. This joyfulness is with the object. And if I was just with the object, if I were near the object, if I could own the object, I mean, it goes to such a degree, the stronger our sense that this is inherently giving me joy, the less I want to be separated from it, especially when it comes to other people. We want to control the other person. It goes to such a degree, we want them to do what we want them to do whatever we want. I mean, we want to control them in that they can only do what we want them to. So when they go out, when they talk to this person and so forth. So the sense, I want to control my joy that's within this person. When in actuality, it's just my own mind experiencing joy. And that could be triggered by that object, but it's not necessarily that I can only experience joy with that person. But it's, again, that sense, I can't be happy without that person, for instance. So to be aware that it's only my mind labeling. It depends on this experience I have right now, and it changes all the time. I may not be joyful the next time I meet them, or it may change over time. But to become aware that it's just my mind labeling joyful on the basis of that object in that moment. And that is just my mind labeling, and that the joy is experienced in my own mind and can be triggered by that other person, but doesn't have to be. So in that sense, to let go of that attachment. Anyway, but it's hard. It's more difficult to reduce that attachment than to reduce aversion, for instance, or anger. Anyway, but you can work on that and make an effort. And hopefully it'll be reduced over time. But he says, honestly, I find less and less joy in the actual activities that I used to enjoy before practicing Buddhism. Well, first of all, the joy is still there, I would argue. It's just a conventionally existent joy, but maybe not in the usual activities. Which activities could these be? I mean, I'm thinking of, for instance, making a whole bunch of money, or working so hard for my reputation and for my standing in society. I mean, I guess we get a sense that this is so empty and meaningless. However much money we have, I mean, it's not going to give us any lasting happiness and so forth. I don't even have to say that. I mean, it's like teaching to the choir. Of course, everyone knows. I mean, in the Buddhist context, we're aware of that. So what used to bring us joy, maybe chasing, I don't know, a partner, and chasing, I don't know, any kind of advantages with another person. I don't know, whatever. It seems meaningless. So we don't enjoy the same stuff that we did before. So what do we enjoy instead? Well, attending and teaching, maybe seeing His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I mean, attending and teaching by him, or practicing, I don't know, generosity or whatever. I mean, any kind of dharmic experience, focusing on love and compassion, meditating on that. So I think our old ways of finding joy is replaced by something new. So, I mean, of course, if that's not happening, then that needs to be analyzed. Why am I not experiencing joy in the Dharma? Well, what could be the cause for that? Am I doing it in a way in which just joy is not coming? Am I not doing it right, etc.? But yeah, this question reminds me of situations when you start with the Dharma, and as you continue on, you just don't enjoy the same stuff. It's not as important as it used to be. But at all times, it was joy. It was conventional joy. It was never any inherent joy. And joy is still experienced, I think, more than before. I mean, most people who practice the Dharma, there's a sense, their overall sense of satisfaction and inner peace, and also joy in that sense, therefore. I mean, what is joy? I mean, like a sense of well-being and happiness, enjoying something, enjoying little things. It doesn't have to be something so great. So doing that, but in a slightly different way. So I think, yeah, It's good to check, is my life more joyful by practicing the Dharma? And actually, that's usually the result of Dharma practice. But it's an important question, so I definitely wanted to address it. If anyone else has got something to add to that, is there anyone who's got something to say about that, about joy? And I mean, I think it's so important. So I just have one view, but I'm sure there's more. No? Okay. Anyway, then let's move on to B's first question. I think I can, yeah, there's two parts to the questions that are quite different. So B asked a question about the mind, which I think is brilliant, to bring whatever we study, to also bring the mind in there. And I remember, I think it was Dalit who told me that a lot of people found Jadu Rinpoche's teachings on Mahamudra brought things into perspective. I mean, why do we talk about emptiness and so forth? Here in this particular class, the focus is more on the object, on emptiness itself, what it refers to. But of course, it doesn't exist separate from the mind that perceives it. I mean, no, it couldn't. I mean, of course, anything that exists also as the object of a particular mind. And here we're mainly interested in our own mind, of course, generating an understanding of emptiness. So if you haven't attended Jadu Rinpoche's teachings yet, if you haven't listened to the recordings yet, please do so if you get the chance. I mean, those teachings were so precious. First of all, the time Rinpoche gave. I mean, I don't think Rinpoche teaches that intensive, well, hardly ever that intensive, and gives that depth and profound explanations. Incredible. So precious. And yeah, it definitely puts things into perspective. These are the incredible qualities of a realized master, that they show us how everything is connected when it comes to the different Buddhist concepts. They're all connected, and they put everything into place. And at times we focus more on, in this case here, on the object, emptiness itself, but we also need to focus on the mind. And Rinpoche so beautifully gave us this. It was almost like a class on Lorik to a certain degree, of course, with Mahamudra and what the mind is, just in a slightly different way. So giving us something to work with, of course, with regard to the mind, and putting everything into perspective anyway. Okay, but going back to B's question here. So she's addressing this conceptual mind, which is a little difficult, this idea, conceptual mind versus other consciousnesses. So we spent a lot of time learning about this, debating it, thinking about it. What is this conceptual mind? Okay, so one thing that may be helpful, I want to say before I even start answering the question. So one thing that may be helpful is this analogy that is sometimes given, that when you use your sense consciousnesses are described as direct perceivers, in that it's still subjective, of course. I mean, you perceive only as much as your eye sense power allows you to, in other words. So if you're short-sighted or far-sighted, if you've got some fold with your eye, well, there'll be a limit to what will appear to your sense faculty, and therefore what will appear to your eye consciousness. So it's still totally subjective. However, it is the case that an external object that we conventionally call an external object, of course, outside of ourselves, it has an effect on our sense faculties. It triggers our sense faculties, and as a result of that, we perceive what we call tables, chairs, and so forth. Okay, so that's a direct perception. Now, these objects that appear to us, if you were to put a veil on them, if you were to put something like a veil over it, that is how, this is the analogy that's given, that's how your conceptual mind perceives it. Because here you don't have the sense faculties that give you a direct information, a direct input, if you like. Now, all you have is, well, a memory of what you previously saw and your sense of what the object is. So the veil is your own understanding of what that object is, your own subjective sense of what this object is. And that is described as the meaning generality. What is a table? What does table mean to me? To me, subjectively, based on what I've seen so far, etc., my own thoughts, etc. So as a result of that, whenever I think about a table, a meaning generality, a general sense or general generic image, I mean, for lack of a better word, that appears to my mind. And through that, it's like covering this vase or whatever with a veil of my own conception, I perceive the vase indirectly. It no longer presents itself to my sense faculties, but rather through the veil of my conceptions or through the veil of my sense of what it is, I say I indirectly see the vase. Some would actually argue I don't see the vase at all. It's just a projection of my mind. There's some disagreement on that. Can you say by way of the meaning generality appearing, the object also appears, so the meaning generality of the table appears, and through that, the table appears? Some would say, no, it doesn't. It doesn't appear, actually. Well, according to Lama Tsongkhapa, it does appear. So there's some difference here, but in the end, it's just a matter of definition, or like, do you say you do see it or you don't see it? But what we perceive is the same, right? It's just a generic image that appears to the mind. And through that, we say we perceive the object. Okay, so if a flower can appear, now here her question is, a flower can appear directly to a conceptual mind. I wouldn't say it appears directly. It doesn't directly appear, because directly would mean without the generic image, just as the object is right in front of you. Sometimes the easiest way maybe to understand that, I don't know, but I've done that when I'm with a class, for instance. I've asked them, look at usually I sit in a classroom in the cloud gungeon, there's a whiteboard behind me. And I'd say to everyone, look at the whiteboard. Does it appear to your mind? And everyone nods their heads. Yes, it appears with its color, with its shape, and so forth. So directly, it appears directly to your sense perception. Actually, as I talk about the whiteboard, and as they're looking, the people in the classroom, as they're looking at the whiteboard, they're also thinking about it. So there's at the same time a conceptual mind thinking about the whiteboard, but they're not really aware of it, because the dominant mind in that moment is the eye consciousness perceiving the whiteboard. So the same with you now looking at the screen. I'm telling you, pay attention. You're watching the screen. Now, as I'm saying that, your conceptual mind is also thinking about the screen, yes, but what you're aware of is this vivid image that appears, or that is part of your eye consciousness. Now, if I ask you to close your eyes and think of the same image you saw a minute ago, then you become aware, so it still appears, but it doesn't appear to your sense faculties. It's just from memory, and it's not as clear, it's not as vivid as it previously did. Well, that is the generic image. And through the generic image, you're also getting at the screen. It's not like it's just some generic image and you can't get at the screen. I mean, Lama Tsongkhapa's argument would be you can still think about the screen. It is the screen you're thinking of, but it is mixed with your own sense what that screen means based on what you saw previously and so forth. So that's the difference. Therefore, if you close your eyes and you're just thinking of the screen without the eye consciousness interfering in that moment, you become aware, so it's the screen is only appearing indirectly. Okay, so in her case here, she takes the flower as an example. I would say it doesn't appear directly to a conceptual mind, and therefore appears mixed with its meaning generality. Yeah, so the flower, it's like you cover it with the veil of your own conceptions, and through that, the flower appears, but just not directly. Mixed with this meaning generality, that is the appearing object. Okay, the meaning generality is described as the appearing object. Why is the meaning generality needed for the conceptual mind to access the flower? Well, how else would you access the flower? It doesn't appear to any sense faculty that is connected to your conceptual mind. A conceptual mind doesn't have that. It's just your concepts that help you to get at the object. There's no other way. Similarly, it has been asked, if permanent objects can appear directly to a conceptual mind, why is there a meaning generality of it? Okay. Permanent objects don't appear directly either. Only their meaning generality. They only appear through their meaning generality. But permanent objects are said to be the appearing. Any permanent object is the appearing object of a conceptual mind. That is just how an appearing object has been defined. If it appears to a conceptual mind and it is permanent, it is called the appearing object. With a direct perceiver, if it appears to a direct perceiver as opposed to a conceptual mind, if it appears to a direct perceiver and it is impermanent, it's called the appearing mind, the appearing object of a direct perceiver. So it's just, this is how the word appearing object is used for, like I said, a conceptual mind. If it's permanent and it appears, it's the appearing object of a conceptual mind. And if it's impermanent and it appears to a conceptual mind, it is not the appearing object, because the main object is something permanent. The main appearing object is something permanent. And anything that is permanent, therefore, is described as the appearing object. But it could also be named differently. The appearing object could be defined differently. But the main point, all I'm trying to say is that if something permanent appears to your mind, if that's the main object you're reflecting on, let it be emptiness, for instance, it can only appear to your mind through what emptiness means to you. That is your generic image, your meaning generality of emptiness. So it's mixed with that. Your understanding of emptiness will come into it, and through that way, you get at emptiness. So it's mixed. The meaning generality of emptiness is mixed with emptiness. Is the appearance of the meaning generality what makes mental consciousness conceptual? Is the appearance of the meaning, is that what makes a mental consciousness conceptual? Yes. Like a contamination to the mental consciousness. Contamination, yeah, you could call it that, because a Buddha doesn't have that. The Buddha directly experienced, with every mental consciousness, directly experiences the object. In our case, it is definitely a hindrance, if you like. The mind is hindered. I mean, it's still great that we have conceptual consciousnesses, because our sense consciousnesses are so limited as to what they can perceive. They can only perceive sense objects. So there's so much more to this world than sense objects, which is why the conceptual mind is so helpful to get in particular at objects that right now are hidden to us because of our habitual tendency to hold on to inherent existence and have inherent existence appear to us all the time. There's no way we get at emptiness with our sense consciousnesses. It can only be our mental consciousness. It's only the conceptual mind which can reflect on emptiness. So this is our first, the first mind that can actually think about it, reflect on it, and take the first step towards eventually realizing emptiness, even directly. Okay, so it's very helpful, but it's a hindrance in a way. It's a limited mind that a Buddha wouldn't have. And such a mind is possessed only by ordinary beings? Oh, no. Highly advanced Aryas, even Arhats, who are liberated. That is, any sentient being, any being other than a Buddha has a conceptual mind, right? Any sentient being. So only a Buddha has totally overcome any kind of conceptual mind, because there's only direct perception. So it's not just ordinary people who have conceptual minds. In other words, when an ordinary being's mental consciousness engages with an object, permanent or impermanent, a meaning generality automatically and inevitably appears. Yes, that's true. That is true, I would say. all our mental consciousnesses, with a few exceptions, are conceptual. For instance, they say some dream consciousnesses, but that's when we're asleep. Here, I guess B is talking about the awakened state. So the moment our mental consciousness engages, and it engages all the time, our mental consciousness is always there. It never stops. Even during deep sleep, it's subtler. It's not as coarse going from here to there. I mean, it may just focus on nothingness, darkness when you're in a deep sleep state, but it's still there. It's there when you die. It's there when you faint. It's there when you fall asleep, when you are asleep, when you wake from the sleep, when you dream. It's always there. That's the one thing that's always with you. It's always with us. The sense consciousness is sometimes there, sometimes not. I think from Judge Rinpoche's teachings, that also became quite clear how eloquently Rinpoche talked about, went from sutra to tantra, from tantra to sutra, and then also talked about the subtler minds and the coarser minds, and really gave us a sense how there's this constant movement. But the point is, the mental consciousness is ever present. And well, unless we, of course, realize emptiness directly, then not every mental consciousness is conceptual. But conceptual mind still remains with us until a very high level. I mean, until we become Buddhas, it'll still be there. But of course, not every mental consciousness is conceptual. But for ordinary beings, with a few exceptions, some dream minds that can be direct perceiving mental consciousnesses, well, yes, they're all conceptual. That's the difference. So just to say it one more time, as ordinary beings, most of our like 99.999% of our mental consciousnesses are conceptual, whereas a person, a highly advanced person, a highly realized person, who's not yet a Buddha, still has conceptual minds, but they also have a lot of direct perceiving minds, direct perceiving mental consciousnesses, such as yogic direct perceivers, directly realizing subtle impermanence, emptiness, and so forth. Okay. But anyway, for us ordinary beings, so meaning generality, automatically and inevitably appears. Yeah, so you don't have to make an effort. Oh, meaning generality, please appear. I need to reflect on this. No, it just happens automatically. So it is said, goes on to say, that both meaning generality of flower and flower appear to the conceptual mind. Yes, but only the meaning generality is the appearing object. What does that mean? To appear, but not the meaning generality? Well,
I made a mistake there. The last sentence, I meant to say, what does that mean? To appear, but not the appearing object.
But to appear, but not to be the appearing object. Yeah, well, the reason being that it's not permanent, right? It's like, as I said before, why? This is a little difficult. It's like, yeah, the meaning generality is the main appearing object. It's through the appearing object that you can get at the object the mind actually wants to get at. So why do you say any permanent object is the appearing object? Yeah, that is it. It's just, I mean, I personally feel, and can be debated, but someone decided based on, the way you label, the way you define something. Okay, so whatever is permanent, since the meaning generality is the appearing object, is the main appearing object, and that is permanent. So therefore we say all the other permanent objects that appear to a conceptual mind, although they're not the meaning generality, they are the appearing object. Right? I mean, it's just a matter of definition in that case. But it doesn't change the fact that although, let's say, selflessness being a permanent phenomenon, although that is the appearing object, still it relies on a meaning generality of selflessness for the mind to be able to get at selflessness. Right? That's the main point. So there's no other way, but what is selflessness? So in other words, to put it in a really bland way, what does selflessness mean to me? Right? Based on my understanding, on my background, and on whatever, that meaning generality, that whatever that means to me, right, of emptiness. That meaning generality appears to my mind, and through that I understand, I reflect on, I do something with emptiness, I do something with selflessness. That is, I think about it, right? So based on all my Buddhist background, whatever that is, I have some kind of definitely very mistaken sense of what selflessness is. And through that sense, that meaning generality that automatically appears to my mind when I start thinking about it, I can actually think about emptiness. Does that make sense?
For a direct perceiver, like eye consciousness, when we say a flower appear to it, we mean the actual flower appear to the eye consciousness. But I seem to be hearing you say that with the conceptual mind, thinking about flower, we say the flower appear to it, but it's not the actual flower appearing to the conceptual mind, but what I think a flower is.
Okay, this is where there's some disagreement. I mean, when you think about even the sense consciousness, is it an actual flower appearing? Or is there just a certain shape and color? I mean, we say the actual flower is appearing, right? But what is appearing to you is different to what appears to me, right? So are there many flowers, the one that appears to you and the one that appears to me? No, we label, I see flower, right? Because I see a certain shape and color, I can say I see an actual flower. But in the end, it's only one side of the flower that I see, right? And you see a different perspective. And what we both see is totally different meaning, well, there's some similarity, but it's definitely not identical. Let's put it that way. Not totally different. There's some commonality, but it's not exactly the same. And there's only one flower. And still we say, I see the flower and you see the flower. But when we really look for it, and we can say it's the actual flower, yes. So based on what appears to the mind, we can label the actual flower appears to me. But I can say that for the conceptual mind as well. The actual flower is appearing to me. But here it's not directly, because it doesn't appear in the same way as to the sense consciousness, which all it needs is a sense faculty, and the input of on the sense faculty that is then determines what appears to the eye consciousness. For the conceptual mind, that input is not there. So what is the meaning generality? It's through the meaning generality, therefore, that the actual flower appears.
Well, so I suppose we are talking about the degree of accuracy of our perception, direct or conceptual.
Yes.
Just to simplify things, say like our perception, direct perception of an object is accurate. And then from that point, then we can say that the conceptual mind thinking about the same object is not so accurate because it's really just our idea of what it is.
Not so accurate, not so clear, let's say it, right? Not as clear or not as close to what's there, if you like. I mean, if you just ask, if I just go back to the example I gave, I'll ask you to look at the screen or look at let's say there's a flower in the room and you're watching the flower. And then I ask you to close your eye and continue to think of the flower. The difference between the appearance, right? One is very vivid and the second is no longer as vivid because now it's mixed with the meaning generality. It's still very similar to what you saw before.
Well, that is in the case of an impermanent object that the sense consciousness have experienced before.
That's
so
true.
Now the conceptual mind, when they say the flower appear, really what it is that we are recollecting a memory of the flower. So the memory of the flower is what we now call the object of engagement for this conceptual mind, which is the actual flower, supposedly impermanent. So that to me is a contradiction there. But whether or not accurate or not, let's say use an example like emptiness. I've not experienced emptiness in any way. So whatever I think of emptiness is just my idea of emptiness.
Yes, true.
So a conceptual mind, so what they are saying here is that the meaning generality of emptiness and emptiness are being mixed.
Yes.
So the emptiness that's being mixed here is still my own idea of what emptiness is.
Yes,
it could be totally wrong.
Yes, so true. This is the whole debate that we go through. Is the meaning generality of emptiness really the meaning generality of emptiness, or of what I think emptiness is? That's my point of debate. Yeah, of course.
When we say meaning generality of anything, isn't that our idea of what it is? I mean, even the meaning generality of flower. You know,
but when I see the flower in actuality, isn't that in the end because of my eyes? And isn't that what it's in the end always subjective. You see, like you can argue the same. In a debate, I would say, well, B, what about when you see the flower and your green is actually my blue? Who's right and who's wrong? It's only just a subjective, right? Your eyes are totally your unique eyes, and mine are my unique eyes. And I'm standing here and you're standing there. It's totally subjective. But with emptiness, yes, okay. The flower is like an object we can agree on. It's easy to recognize. Okay, emptiness is harder. So there is still a difference. There's still a difference because, well, have you fallen to the extreme of nihilism or not? That needs to be seen. So it's not exactly the same, but it's also not that different. Okay, B, think about it some more and come back next time, right? This is great. I really like this question because it's really important. Because so far I've talked about emptiness just sort of like floating in the room. But these points are really important. Like, what is the mind? How does it perceive its object? But let me just address.
Geshe-ma?
Yes, please.
May I add to follow up on B
Yes.
and what you were discussing? So
Yes.
even when my eye faculty is looking at the flower, because the input to the eye is really only shape and color. So even to call it a flower, I mean, the conceptual mind has already jumped in.
Yeah,
right?
That's the next debate. Yes.
So I feel like anything whatever input is coming through any sense, you know, the labeling is so quick because of we've been taught to recognize and things, right? So I feel like the conceptual mind is just like a nanosecond behind. Or
That
something
makes
like
sense. It is a nanosecond. That's actually really, it's like there's this sequence, like first you have direct perception and right afterwards you have the conceptual mind perceiving the same object. But this is a whole other debate. Some of my teachers would say your eye consciousness perceives shapes and colors and that's it. Others would argue, no. The first time as a child, you perceive shape and colors, but slowly your eye consciousness is trained to perceive flower, to perceive, I don't know, table and so forth. So it goes beyond shape and color. But then others would argue, but isn't that the conceptual mind? And it's really hard to determine. So it's difficult. It's really difficult to tell them apart. But yes, the conceptual mind is ever present. And without the labeling, without our conceptual mind, I mean, this is what modern scientists would agree with. We only see the things we have a concept of, right? That's a lot of modern scientists would say, if you have no concept of a tree, you won't see a tree. So you see shapes and colors, you develop a concept of a tree, and then you start being able to see it. And that very much goes with the Buddhist ideas phenomena are merely labeled. It supports that, doesn't it?
Yeah, but Geshe-ma, do you feel like, you know, the input is still just stuff hitting retinas and hitting eardrums, you know, and then they're translated into tree or breeze, rustling leaves. So I don't know, I feel like I'm more with the, you know, teachers who say you don't ever see anything, you know, without the conceptual, or you don't hear and say, I'm hearing Geshe-ma's voice without me, you know, labeling it as your voice.
Okay, but the thing is, what appears to your what appears to your sense consciousnesses, don't you need a label of that too? The shapes and colors. So what is first? Perceiving blue, right? It's like chicken and egg question. So It's really difficult. Fortunately, we have previous lives. We can always argue, oh yeah, we've seen it since beginning of this time, so we've got a concept and that is passed on and so forth. But it's a really difficult issue. What comes first? You need to have as a child, even as a child, what is first, the direct perception or the label first? And then it becomes very difficult. But I agree with you. This is a point of debate, but it's less about finding an exact answer, but going through the reflection on that and getting a better sense of, direct perception versus conceptual mind.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Great. So last question for today. Sorry, that took a little longer. Jimmy's question on non-production and mental labeling. I really like his drawing. He did a great job here. But I think there's some misunderstanding, non-production. Anyway, let me just first read the question. So there's a picture attached below. I wonder if this is what we mean by non-production and mental labeling. In this room, there are tall and short, dark and light, old and young, beautiful and ugly. They are not produced because they're dependent on the others. Is this what we mean by labeling? Of course, they're produced. What I said was they're not inherently produced. They're not inherently arisen. But I'm not saying that all these objects are non-produced. Produced is just another word for arising. So we talk about something arising from the perspective of, let's say, the seed. No, sorry, the sprout. The sprout is produced, it arises in dependence on a cause that produced it, that caused its arising. So there was these two factors. But we would still, based on the fact that something comes into existence in dependence on many causes and conditions, we still say it is produced, but not inherently. It's all about the beginning when we said the eight characteristics of dependent arising, which means there's no inherent ceasing and no inherent arising, so no inherent production. And then mental labeling. So things are produced by their causes and conditions, but also mentally labeled. Okay, so how do you put the two together? You've got the tall guy and you've got the short guy, tall and short. Okay, so on one hand, this tall guy was produced by his causes and conditions, his previous life's mind, his parents' ovum and semen. So all these caused this person. At the same time, this person is labeled on the 5 aggregates as a person, and also in relation to someone else as a tall person. In relation to this person, we label them tall. So our labeling, the mind labeling or phenomena being merely labeled, doesn't mean that they have not arisen from causes and conditions. Yes, they have. We label that they have arisen from certain causes and conditions because certain preceding factors were necessary for them to exist the way they exist right now. So we label that they're conventionally, they're nominally produced. They have been produced. That's how we label this person, for instance. But there's more to this person. We label them as being a person, as having independence on a certain passport. We label them as, I don't know, Swedish or American or whatever. And in relation to another person, here a shorter person, we label them as tall, for instance. And then we could go on like old and young. Well, if you've got like 110-year-old grandmother, let's say she's 80, and there's another elderly woman who's 110 years old, will she be young? Okay, so she's also produced from certain causes and conditions, of course. Her former continuum, her parents, and so forth. Likewise, she is a woman, independence on certain body parts, certain aspects of her mind. She's a person, independence on her 5 aggregates. She's young in relation to this person. No, she's old in relation to this younger person here, but she's young in relation to this 190-year-old turtle or 110-year-old lady if she were right next to her. So is she in and of herself a person? No, merely labeled a person on the in relation to her aggregates. Is she old? No, in and of itself, she's neither old nor young. In relation to this person, she's old. In relation to the 190-year-old turtle that I just visualized sits right next to her, she's young. That's it. No youngness and oldness to be found other than in relation to this, that, or in relation to the aggregates being a person. There's no personness found other than that, and so forth. And in relation to the fact that there are certain phenomena that preceded her, that together with cooperative conditions, which we call cooperative conditions, so these causes and cooperative conditions acting together, they gave rise to her right now. So based on that, I call her being produced. I call her, I labeled, she has arisen. Will I find any being produced within this old lady? No, I won't find anything. It's always in relation to something other than her. Her causes and conditions, for instance, I labeled she was produced. In relation to this young person, I labeled she's old, and so forth. Right? Does that make sense? All right. So I hope I've been clear. They're not produced. They're not inherently produced. Okay, let me just add this. So here is last sentence. They're not inherently produced. I agree. They're not inherently produced because they're dependent on the others, not just the others, ugly and beautiful. They're dependent on many other things as well. This is just, I mean, it's not necessarily that you need this one to have that. You could also have other phenomena. But yeah, in general, you need something smaller to label tall. You need something younger to label old, and so forth. So in that sense, yes, I agree with what Jimmy says, dependent on other factors. Is that what we mean by labeling? That's just in relation to what you label. There's more to labeling. You need a mind that labels. You need the label itself, tall, small, old, young. So you need the label. In Tibetan, you would say you need the name. Usually it says it's mere name. It's merely nominal. In Tibetan, it says like this word mingtsam. Ming means name, or the word that you refer to, the symbol that you use to refer to this size here. So in this case, tall. So you need that label. You need that mingtsam, that mere word. You need the mind that labels, and you need other phenomena in relation to which you label. So you need more than just these other factors. You need a labeling mind and so forth. Okay, so, and then dependent on that, in relation to that, to certain labels, to a mind that labels, and many other phenomena, we label something as this, that, and the other. Okay, I hope that's clear and I've not confused you any further. Great. Now, going back to the text, I've spent a whole hour. Sorry, I didn't realize how quickly time passed. Well, at least now we won't run out of material. So let me just briefly, next time I won't spend that much time on questions, but let me just briefly, maybe this is slightly changed. Just briefly, before we start to meditate, what we've gone through, we've established exactly that phenomena are dependently risen, therefore they have a risen independence, and having a risen independence on something, they therefore cannot have arisen inherently. If they were to arise inherently, there are only these four possibilities, and we've gone through them. We even found philosophers who held the view of arising from itself, arising from other. Of course, there are many philosophers, even within Buddhism, who hold that there's appearance arising from other, which is just another way of saying arising from something inherently different, which of course we've heard is impossible. So that has been refuted, arising from itself, from something different, from both. Of course, that's impossible. Sorry for going through it so quickly. And neither, having no cause, that's also impossible. Therefore, none of those four, arising from itself, from something inherently different, from both, or arising causelessly are possible. Okay, so having refuted these extreme views, we go back to, therefore, it has arisen conventionally. We talked about all this to a certain degree, and then what else is mentioned by Lama Tsongkhapa is the fact that now we have this diamond sliver. We have this reasoning. What is the reasoning? It doesn't arise from itself. It doesn't arise from something inherently different and so forth, based on which we can come to understand that an object such as a sunflower or any other object that is impermanent, it doesn't arise inherently. Now, one thing we need to understand here is that these reasonings, and that is true for many of the reasonings we apply, and in particular that which we want to establish, which is the lack of inherent existence here of the arising, but of course the lack of inherent existence of being a vase or being a table, whichever way you want to come to understand the lack of inherent existence, whether in this combination with arising here, or just say the phenomenon does not exist inherently, or here doesn't arise inherently, and so forth. So the point being, we need to negate. We need to negate. That's so important because we're very good at adding. We add all the time. We make everything more concrete and more solid than it actually is. Therefore, our problem is not that we deny the existence of something. No, we add too much, right? If you want to summarize, our root problem is that we solidify things in a way which is unrealistic. So we need to remove, we need to negate. Buddhist realization is about negating what our mind keeps adding, what our mind keeps exaggerating. So we need to understand that emptiness is a negation. We're trying to understand a negation by understanding its reasons, which are also negations here. And that took us from the four reasonings to positive and negative phenomena. And we found there are different types of negative phenomena. Those negative phenomena that are affirming negatives, where when something is negated, in the place of negating one thing, still something is affirmed. That's also not something we want when we deal with emptiness. We don't want anything to be affirmed, because when we affirm, we add. What do we add? Inherent existence. We add an unrealistic existence. We want to just negate, because our mind has this tendency. The moment it moves towards affirmation, it adds more than it needs to. So what our mind needs to do, realizing emptiness, is just negate. And we have such a hard time with that. It's just so funny. Our mind does it all the time, in the sense that we negate a little bit and then we get bored. And then we want to know how things really exist. But we haven't really negated. So we haven't really negated yet. We haven't negated enough. So now we're trying to put our weird sense of negation, which is really, we haven't really negated. It gets boring after sometimes, just negating. We want some affirmation. So we bring our sense of inherent existence and dependent arising together, and it doesn't seem to make any sense, right? It's so hard to bring the two together, that phenomena exist, but they lack inherent existence. And my sense is we don't negate enough. We get bored of negating, which is why it's so important to stress again and again. First, just negate inherent existence. Negate inherent existence before you start to establish how phenomena exist. Of course, you need to do it, but sometimes we don't do it long enough. Okay, anyway. But that's how we got through the different types of negations, of affirmative, non-affirmative, and that's pretty much where we got to. So we have non-affirming negatives like emptiness, just negating inherent existence. Affirming negative, there are different types. And we need to know the different types, because our mind, if we negate, we try to cheat ourselves. We try to cheat ourselves through like totally negating and turn it into an affirming negation. Therefore, we need to know what are the different types. So we've learned about them, and that's it. So good enough for today. Okay. And I guess we could continue then next time from here. unless I forgot to explain something. I don't remember whether we went through all of them. So maybe Dalit or someone could let me know. Did we go through these ones? Do they need to be mentioned, or have we finished them? I kind of have a sense we finished them. So we can next time definitely finish the rest of this, because that part is important and I want to be done with it. Yeah, and we can definitely do it next time. Great. So all that's left is some, I'll stop talking. You focus on the breath for some time, and I'll just quickly wrap up. That is, allow you to analyze once again what we've gone through today, especially of course emptiness. Okay, so please focus just on your breath, and let go of any disruptive thoughts. Just for a while, be mindful of your breathing. Now, what we've learned so far is that the object we want to realize is a mere negation of a characteristic that is impossible. It's just the absence of inherent, objective, true existence. Or if you like, the absence of being findable. When undertaking ultimate analysis. Take your own I. Which is the main object of many of our thoughts. Thoughts such as, I need I want. I don't want. I must achieve. And so forth. Ultimate mode of existence is simply that it cannot be found. It's nowhere in your mind or body. Not separate from them. It's not both mind and body. And you cannot point at it. Never the same from one moment to the next. And still, it's not non-existent. It's something that exists only nominally. In relation to anything other than itself. And in relation to a label and the mind that labels. There's a conventional I. Not more and not less. Although unfortunately, to us, it seems to be a lot more. So now, complete this meditation, this short analysis, whatever conclusion you've come to, whatever insight you've gained. Single-pointedly, just focus on that insight. In order to internalize it. And take it to a more emotional level. And of course, let's dedicate all the positive potential we've accumulated together. May this become a cause for us to attain the enlightened state of a Buddha, so that we're able to lead all other sentient beings to the same state. May also cause our great masters, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other lamas and highly realized beings, to have a long and healthy life. So that they be with us for a long time to come, to guide and inspire us. And let's also dedicate with sentient beings right now. Of course, continue to dedicate the virtue towards those who are sick, like Geshe, Talilubin, and everyone else. Gain back their physical, also mental strength. And let's dedicate particular towards those who struggle for the well-being of sentient beings in the form of fair democracy. So may their struggles prevail. be successful to achieve a just and democratic world. So with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayers. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chinrezig Denzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi might not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you. Thank you very much. And please try to remember, well, karma, especially for this coming week. Make it a point. If you have time, read whatever's in the Lamrim Chenmo or any other Lamrim text to bring it into your daily life to the best of your ability. And of course, bodhichitta as well. And your understanding of emptiness. And then we'll meet again next Monday. We'll finish the first verse, at least the material of the first verse. And if there's any suggestions as to the timing, once I'm back in India, otherwise, well, for now, if we'll meet on Mondays, we'll continue to meet on Mondays at 6 p.m. Israeli time. So whatever that means where you are. Okay, great. Thank you very much and have a great week. See you next Monday.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Dalit, will the 6 p.m. Israeli time begin from next week?
Yes.
From
No,
this coming
Speak in Germany.
No.
No, sorry, from the other weeks.
Next week is still 7
It's
p.m.
from the 10 to April.
From the 17th of April.
Yeah.
Geshe is in India and so forth. It's from the 17th.